Hey everyone, and I've got the J Beebs haircut. So in this video I just wanted to talk about a really fascinating study by, or not a study, but a paper by, if I can find the author, Professor Scott Galloway. And it's really providing a statistical insight behind the rise of male virginity, male and female virginity, but primarily with a focus on male virginity, and why it seems to have just exploded in the last maybe 10 or 15 years. So just to jump into the article straight away. So it starts with a very well-known study, I think kind of within the manosphere and places adjacent to the manosphere. So it's the General Social Survey. So as most people have probably seen, so of adult males aged 18 to 30, around 28% reported that they did not have sex in the past year. And again, that's a very kind of widely cited statistic. So generally what we kind of see in the bar graph is just really an explosion from around maybe 2007, 2008. And again, there's a lot of potential causal factors, or at least associations, that one can draw from that. So the obvious ones are like, I think the first iPhone was released in 2007. Facebook released a smartphone app in 2007. We had the release of, I think, platforms like Instagram, maybe 2009, I want to say. And generally it maps onto the explosion in social media and the access to social media on the go at all times using a smartphone. So just to jump straight into it, I've mentioned this topic before, highlighting an emerging crisis among young men, and it elicits a range of emotions and responses, especially in the reductionist world of social media. So he took a screenshot of a chat, clearly of a detractor. And Roxanne Gay writes, "This is quite the projection. I hope someone has sex with you soon." And I mean, that's quite funny. Like, I think there's an empathy blind spot when it comes to male issues, and it's a conversation I've had before with other people. And again, like with the YouTuber Misha Petrov, it's interesting. It's like this idea that men should open up about their issues, that they should be emotionally available, and yet whenever someone reports or discusses grievances that men have, it's like, well, you're, as Roxanne implies, well, you're basically an incel, shut the fuck up. So it's odd. And yet we wonder why men are perhaps emotionally reserved. And I don't think it's just purely a social phenomenon. I think it's most likely a biological phenomenon. I think men are highly competitive. They don't want to appear to be weak because they don't want to lose their status and what they've gained through that status. That's another topic. So it reads on. "Thanks, Roxanne. Neither the sex lives of young American men nor their relative rate of college attendance is that striking by itself, except to men involved. What should trouble all of us is what these statistics portend. Families are the foundational element of society, and most successful families are the product of an intimate relationship between two adults. The most important decision most of us make in life is whether and whom to marry, and the most important person in our adult lives is our mate. Married people are 77% wealthier than single people, and their net worth typically increases 16% each year they are together. Married people live longer and are happier than single people. Higher marriage rates are correlated with greater GDP per capita, greater economic mobility, and a reduction in child poverty as much as 80%. So that's quite profound, actually. To continue on, so I mean, we have this conversation in society constantly about the validity of marriage, and it's usually seen through the atomistic lens of the individual's needs. And there's maybe there's a compelling case that there are other moral stakeholders, i.e. society at large and the family unit. Maybe we should factor that into the ethical calculus, but I'll leave that for another time. The path of forging these relationships typically involves sex. If a young adult hasn't had sex in the past year, it's unlikely that person is on the path toward a long-term bond with someone. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that it's any one group's responsibility to sexually service another. What we need to be thoughtful about is how our policies and attitudes ensure that most people have the opportunity and motivation to pursue long-term productive relationships. So he continues on to talk about online dating. So we used to meet potential mates at school, at work, through friends and out in the world. No longer. So there's a graph here that shows, in essence, that online dating now makes up, I think, almost 40%. So almost 40% of all couples get together through some online dating platform or through online communication. And that's, so bars and restaurants are maybe about just under 30%, through friends is maybe around 20%. So yeah, primarily it's through online dating. And continues on to say, and online dating shares flaws with other technologies that scale our instincts. Algorithms are indifferent to social interests, and that coupled with human nature gives us January 6 and QAnon. Dating apps sort potential partners into a tiny group of haves and a titanic group of have-nots. On Hinge, the top 10% of males receive nearly 60% of the likes. The comparable figure for women is 45%. The bottom 80% of male Tinder users, based on percentage of likes received, are competing for the bottom 22% of women. If it were a country, Tinder would be among the most unequal in the world. And it goes on to kind of contrast it to the Gini coefficient for nations versus Tinder if it were a nation. So the Gini coefficient is basically a measure of economic equality and material equality between individuals in a society. So it'll look at things like income inequality, average salaries, access to education, educational graduation per demographic, and so on. So to continue on, so again, that's a point that a lot of people discuss kind of when talking about men's issues and dating. So it's again a concept known as hypergamy, that women typically look for partners that are on their social economic level or above, so they date across and up. Men will typically date or at least sleep with people that are on their level or perhaps even below in terms of socioeconomic status. So to continue on, so what is driving this division? As with so much else online, dating apps don't change human nature, they focus it, like a kid with a magnifying glass melting ants. I think that's an excellent analogy. We often think of artificial intelligence as being this independent, almost third party that is morally neutral, that can be unbiased, and very clearly it can't. And I think dating apps is a great insight into how it magnifies human desires. So if artificial intelligence were truly unbiased, then it wouldn't sort according to that. There wouldn't be an algorithm that basically amplifies the positive feedback loops that it receives. So if someone gets a lot of likes on Tinder, then their profile will be shown on the first kind of, I don't know, whatever you call them, cards, or there'll be one of the first options presented, and it will be a snowball effect. They get more likes, they get placed higher up in the card system, and it just keeps feeding into each other, and that's how you end up with these egregious monopolies of kind of any market. And it's the same with like a business. You know, a business sells more products, it spends more money in advertising, it has more kind of mainstream recognition, so more people buy it, they spend more on advertising, and it just goes on and on and on. So being present and being the focus of attention, having a mind share, is one of the key ways in which artificial intelligence in this specific scenario can heavily bias outcomes. But to continue on, regardless of how we meet potential mates, we sort them in large part based on looks and earning potential. Algorithms magnify that effect. Women are particularly concerned with the earning potential of future mates. Across cultures and over time, a 1989 study found that 37 countries and subgroups, women consistently value the financial capacity of a potential partner more than men do. In the US, financial prospects were nearly 30% more important to women than to men. In a 2017 survey, 71% of American women said it's very important for a man to support his family financially. Only 25% of men said the same about a woman. In sum, women mate socioeconomically horizontally and up, and men do it horizontally and down, kind of as I mentioned before. So yeah, despite the material advances of women in the workplace and in education, their innate evolutionary desire to seek out a provider, or someone more specifically, I guess, that can provide more than they can in terms of raw kind of resources and materials, it's still a deeply embedded drive. And rather than neutralising these biological differences, we see that technology actually seems to amplify them. And Warren Farrell also kind of talks about this, and he notes a couple interesting statistics. So Warren Farrell writes in the book The Boy Crisis that around 75% of women would not date a man that's unemployed, whereas for men it was maybe around a third of men would not date a woman who was unemployed. And there's common statistics as well that over 80% of women expect a man to pay on the first date. I think it's actually 86% from the studies that I've seen. So again, this economic drive, this evolutionary drive to seek out a great provider is only being more magnified despite greater economic equality. So marriage rates in the US have been on the decline for decades. The group that's seen the sharpest decline is poor men. Between 1970 and 2011, the marriage rate for the lowest earning quartile fell by nearly 35%, while that of the highest quartile fell by less than 15%. Alright, okay, so if you're in the wealthiest 25% of men in the country, then the marriage rate for you and your demographic has fell at half the speed as the poorest 25% of the country, or the poorest 25% of males in your country, in your society. So that is quite interesting. And again, it ties into kind of other studies that have said as well, basically, to summarise all of these kind of correlated data points, it's this idea that men are now being seen as economically unattractive. As women earn more money, as they graduate from college at higher rates than men do, and coupled with this drive to find someone who can provide resources, again, the typical provider archetype, they now have a diminishing pool of potential mates that actually earn as much as they do, if not more. Which obviously leads to, again, it may explain in some small part the rise of virginity among men and the rise of kind of largely kind of incels and sexless individuals. So to continue on, most powerful sign of earning potential, especially for people in their 20s who haven't yet realised their potential, is a college degree. College educated men are a median 900,000. I'll start that again. College educated men earn a median 900,000 more over their lifetime than those who only graduate from high school. A college degree also increases your chances of getting married by 30%. And again, estimated lifetime earnings by education. So again, it scales quite considerably from a high school graduate, which is maybe about 1.5 million over the lifespan, to a graduate degree, which is 3.1. Although it would be interesting to see exactly the breakdown by courses and disciplines. I would imagine that much of that earning potential is maybe taken up by STEM graduate degrees, but we have what we have. So, the result of fewer men in college, fewer men that women are interested in. This is good for nobody. It's bad for women who have fewer sexual potential mates. I'll read that again, sorry, my throat keeps going. I don't know if I've had the cold or something like that. So, it's bad for women who have fewer potential mates. Men at the top of the pyramid have access to near on-demand sexual partners, but that's a disincentive to forging a long-term relationship, which doesn't bode well for their long-term happiness. Again, see the previous data about the benefits of marriage. And again, as the author wrote previously, what we see is that technology amplifies human interests, and specifically in this case amplifies male dating preferences. So if there's a surplus of women and, I guess, eligible men, eligible being the salient word, or men that are deemed to be desirable or even highly desirable, they then get to dictate the terms of engagement because there's a far greater supply of women. So women then have to compete against each other much more fiercely. So they take on the dating preferences of men, which is usually, it tends towards casual dating and casual sex. Whereas when it's the inverse, then men have to compete with each other and they then have to offer more commitment, and they have to again shift towards the dating preferences of women. So just to continue on, and then there's the increasing number of men in the body of the pyramid who will be left not merely without sex but without any on-ramp to the intimate relationships upon which so much of their happiness and social capital is built. Second order effects. So what? America spent its first 300 years treating women as a second-class citizen. What's wrong with young men getting the short end of the stick for a while? If this were just about fairness or feelings, then fine, let there be churn. But there are several externalities that could have profound effects on our Commonwealth and the global community. First, less partnering and propagation means fewer babies. Declining birth rates are toxic for economic health. For a glimpse at the declining birth rate future, look at Japan, where birth and marriage rates have fallen to record lows. There are now just 2.1 working age Japanese for every retiree, the lowest ratio in the world. In the United States there are 3.9 and the world average is 7. At the Code conference this week, automaker and future Martian Elon Musk said, possibly the single greatest risk to human civilization is the rapidly diminishing birth rate. No babies, no humanity. And this is an issue I'm surprised that we don't see more people talking about. So I think the global fertility rate is around 2.4, and obviously the replacement level is around 2.1 to maintain current population levels. And it's really surprising that, I mean, if you fall below the replacement level fertility rate, then you lose, humanity's over in maybe 1 or 2 generations. And you can see this in the population projections. So many countries in the West, like Italy, Spain, Greece, the UK, Japan, and China, they all have projected basically for their populations to drop off a cliff. So in some instances, some countries, I think like Spain, may experience a population decline of around 40%. I think in Japan and China it's maybe around 20 to 30%. And not only that, it leads to an inverted age structure, again, where instead of maybe only having 2.1 people of a working age for every person that's retired, maybe it falls to 1.5 or 1 to 1. And that's disastrous when it comes to funding social security, providing even care at home for the elderly, so in a domestic setting, and even for sending off relatives to a care home. Who pays for that? Who provides the care? Who works as a nurse in that setting? And there's a deluge of potential nefarious effects that can come from that. So just to continue on, my Pivot co-host, Kara Swisher, likes to claim that lesbians and evangelicals are the only groups having kids, but at less than 5% of the population, gay couples would need to have literally dozens of children to reverse these trends. Your move, Kara. Second, a large and growing cohort of bored, lonely, poorly educated men is a malevolent force in any society, but it's a truly terrifying one in a society addicted to social media and awash in coarseness and guns. Men are more likely than women to believe in conspiracy theories. Increased frustration about their lack of choices and greater jealousy, stoked by the images of success they see on their screens, will push underachieving men further toward conspiracy theories, radicalisation and nihilist politics. I say will because I'm focused on the future, but a preview of that future is already here. Of the 620 people charged so far in the January 6 riot, 86% are men. And again, I think that's especially salient so if we accept that there's differential outcomes in society according to one's gender or sex, for simplicity's sake, and we accept that many of these economic outcomes are, what's the word I'm looking for? That there's differential economic outcomes between men and women, and that these outcomes are tending to favour women. Again, when we think of the rates or the links between economic depressions and a lot of the most extreme forms of male behaviour, so suicides tend to increase quite significantly. So in Japan in 1998, during the lost decades, so between 1991 and 2001, and it was during, I think it was there was an Asian economic crisis in 1998, and the suicide rate increased in Japan by around 36%. So, and again, at the height of the Great Depression in America, it was around 150 men to 100 women, and that was, as far as I'm aware, quite a considerable jump from what it was like pre-Depression. And again, that number has only grown since the Depression. So the suicide rate is around 3 to 4 times greater now than it was during the Great Depression. And it's because of the barrage of economic downturns that we've experienced in the West and across the developed world as a whole. So it makes complete sense if men feel like that they are worthless and that they gain their worth by being a provider, and if they feel like they now have no stake in that society, then they rebel against it. They find some other way of gaining value, whether it's through crime, like Robert K. Merton's strain theory, whether it's through some sort of deviancy or radical belief system or ideology. Those that don't kill themselves at increasing numbers during times of economic hardship will find other ways to secure value and financial and material resources. So I'd expect a lot of these negative trends to be compounded in the future. So to continue on, global problems, including climate change and more frequent pandemics, require a massive investment of human capital and renewed respect for intellectualism and science. Third, while the forces of technology and social change are taking much from young men, it's unlikely they will lose their political power. This may be the dark heart of the matter. Politicians will emerge from this class, and many more will pander to them. Donald Trump was not an anomaly. Privileged men of wealth rising to power on the message that this isn't your fault and then demonising other groups is a greatest hit of nationalism and the fascism it often inspires. So regardless of what one thinks of Donald Trump, I think we can see that during times of hardship, people look invariably for a scapegoat. And when you have a politician, usually a populist politician, who claims that some sector of society is to blame for the issues that you experience, then yeah, that's going to be, for them, the perfect panacea. This is going to be seen as a remedy, that this populist leader understands me, he sees my problems, he sees what I suffer, and he knows, or purports to know, how to cure that illness, for lack of a better word. Men have characteristics which make it easier for them to accumulate and protect wealth and power. Numerous studies have shown that candidates with deeper voices win more votes. At 25%, A 25% lower vocal pitch is associated with an increase of $187,000 in annual CEO salary. People who are 6 feet tall earn $166,000 more over a 30-year career than those who are 5 feet 5 inches, even controlling for gender, age, and weight. The explanation, many psychologists believe, is increased confidence. One psychologist explains that the process of literally looking down on others may cause one to be more confident. Since the advent of mass media, every president has been taller than the average American male, and the winning candidate has been on average 1.5 inches taller than his opponent. Overall, American men are over 5 inches taller than American women. And it goes on to kind of plot a graph of the average height of American presidents compared to the average American male. So, women who run for office face substantial opposition on the basis of gender, from sexist remarks to disinformation to physical violence. Trumpism, with or without Trump, is the politics of frustration, alienation, and rage. It will only gain in power if these emotions become more prevalent. For 40 years, more women have matriculated at colleges, yet only 24% of Congress is female. What we've witnessed is an explosion in elected officials who pander to a dangerous and growing cohort of men who refuse to embrace science or even agree that there is truth. I'm not entirely sure what that's in reference to be honest. I'm not sure if that's maybe a shot at maybe Trump supporters being climate change deniers. Without the connective tissue of truth and science, it will be near impossible to address future pandemics, much less climate change, There's a link between a reduction in opportunities for young men and hundreds of millions of doses of COVID vaccines likely to expire unused by year end. And again, that's interesting. So I guess the implication being that men who experience less opportunities are predisposed to have less belief in science and some objective form of truth, more likely to veer off towards conspiracy theories, therefore less likely to accept vaccinations or the validity of vaccinations. Okay. So turning the tide, the increase in opportunities for women and people of colour is an important step forward. There is no justification for reversing these hard-fought wins. However, we must do more. While men enjoy numerous inherent and societal advantages, from deafer voices to private clubs, these are actually significant obstacles facing boys. It starts early with small differences. For example, 80% of kindergartner parents expect their girls to attend college, while 77% of parents expect their boys to. But such small differences expand over time. The disparity in parental expectation grows by 10 percentage points by 5th grade. Boys act out more than girls and face harsher discipline, especially in single-parent homes, where boys are 13 percentage points more likely than girls to have been spanked in the past week. Overall, 1 in 4 boys experience at least one school suspension in 8th grade compared to 1 in 10 for girls. And again, that makes sense. So boys, as the maxim goes, that when boys and girls are suffering, boys are more likely to take their suffering out on others, and girls are more likely to take their suffering out on themselves. So that's why we see boys acting out physically, or kind of maybe having less respect for authority, perhaps delinquency of various sorts, and girls, when we often see an overrepresentation of girls in kind of movements of shared suffering, so like bulimia or the anorexia movement. As Abigail Schreier has noted in Irreversible Damage, we also see a radical increase of girls that now identify with the transgender movement and now identify as male or purport to claim that they suffer from gender dysphoria. So that would make sense. So suffering seems to manifest in very different ways for men and for women. Overall, 1 in 4 boys experience at least one school suspension in the 8th grade compared to 1 in 10. Girls, school suspension is predictive of college attendance and college completion, and boys, normalised for behaviour, are twice as likely to be suspended. Black students are also more likely to be disciplined, and black boys face even greater disparities. Finally, in a nation with the world's highest incarceration rate, men are imprisoned at 14 times the rate of women, and 70% of prisoners didn't complete high school. We must do more at every level, but I focus on college because I believe it's a transformative experience for most people. When I applied for UCLA, the acceptance rate was 74%. I had to apply twice. After my initial rejection, I secured a job installing shelves in Ontario, California, spending the day in closets, getting high with my co-workers after work. It dawned on me, maybe this isn't what I want to do with my life. So I appealed the decision and got in. That changed my life and set the foundation for me to become a robust citizen. And again, it looks at UCL admission rates. Sorry. So, yeah, interestingly, this reminds me of another interesting statistic. So it says that UCLA admission rates were 74% in 1980. Now they've dropped to 12% in 2021. And when you couple this, again, there's other statistics going around as well. I don't know if anyone watches, this is an American show, but, sorry, just as a quick anecdote, but there's a show, I think it's called Home Improvement, and it was a show, I think, in the mid-80s, and it was looking at, I wish I could remember the house, but it was like a colonial-style period house. I think it might have been in Boston. And the people bought the house, I think it was for like £35,000. Again, I'll repeat that, £35,000, that's ridiculous. And it kind of goes hand in hand with other statistics. So, as far as I'm aware, in the 1980s, the average house cost around 2 years' salary. Again, kind of on average, 2 years' salary. Whereas today, the average house costs around, I think it's been 10 and 20 times the annual salary. So in 1985, it may have took you maybe 1 or 2 years to earn the sort of money that you could buy a house with. Whereas today, it's more like 20 years. And again, it's just all goes to show that many of these economic goods, high salary, a good house, a nice car, many of these things are becoming much harder to attain. And when these things become harder to attain through conventional means, you have to imagine that people will turn to other means, non-conventional means. Maybe that's crime, or maybe they just reject these conventional goals and maybe even conventional society at large, and they pursue, again, more radical goals, maybe radical belief systems or ideologies. In other words, I think this is a good way of checking the temperature of how fulfilled your society is, whether they can actually attain the conventional goals that one would hope to achieve in their life. So just to continue on. Today, only 12 out of 100 kids get in. Admission directors no longer have the capacity to reach into the homes of unremarkable kids raised by single immigrant mothers and give them opportunities my generation enjoyed. This reflects a conscious decision in America to sequester opportunities to the children of rich people and kids who are freakishly remarkable at 17. This plays out on a collective hallucination that all of us are raising remarkable children. I can prove that 99% of our children are not in the top 1%. We managed to scale Facebook from a $63 billion company in 2012 to almost $1 trillion today, but we couldn't increase the seats of UCLA by more than 6% in that time. And UCLA is better than most. The UC system overall wants to add 20,000 seats by 2030. The 2007 Ivy League schools accepted 22,180 applicants. In 2021, they accepted 22,805. That's a 0.2 annual increase, while tuition increased by more than 4% per year. In 2007, Apple sold 1.4 million iPhones. In 2021, it sold 218 million, a 43% annual increase. We can figure out how to make more than 700 million supercomputers that run all day on a battery and fit it in your pocket, but we can't add thousands of seats to college with $40 billion endowments. College has become the enforcer of an emerging caste system, abandoning promising, if not obviously remarkable, young adults. There are so many of them, we must and we can give them their shot. We need a grand bargain that, in exchange for additional funding, demands our great public intuition. Sorry, I'll repeat that again. Sorry, I can't read today. There are so many of them, we must and we can give them their shot. We need a grand bargain that, in exchange for additional funding, demands our great public institutions leverage technology to double the number of freshman seats in the next decade. And again, I don't know if I entirely agree with that point, but I'll just finish off the article and get to my own thoughts. Extend the benefits of a college education to more women, more people of colour, more foreign students, more handicapped kids, more poor kids, and more artists and engineers and poets and biologists, and more men. America is not about exceptionalism, but acceptance. Life is so rich. So again, I don't entirely know if I agree with that last recommendation to try and considerably expand the acceptance rates in universities, because, so a couple of stats just from Andrew Yang's book, The War on Normal People. So I think the general thesis is correct that graduating from university is a significantly correlates with increased earning potential and with a better kind of material life. I don't dispute that, but I do think that it comes with many drawbacks. So, as Andrew Yang notes, around 40% of all university graduates in America are underemployed. And when you couple that as well, like the article states, with increasing tuition fees, so if you can end up in 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds or more in debt and you're in a job that didn't require your degree, and this say happens on average to maybe around 40% of all those that graduate from university, that's a hard economic proposition to really recommend to people. And again, in the UK, I think around 60% of all university courses do not lead to a median salary. So I think the median salary in the UK is somewhere around £30,000, maybe just above £30,000 actually. So again, I think the breakdown of courses is probably key, because I can imagine that your earning potential could rapidly or exponentially increase depending on maybe a STEM subject or a STEM qualification that you've gained. But if you're someone who, let's use myself for example, has a master's in philosophy, I have to imagine one's earning potential is a little bit more limited. Not in an absolute sense, but yeah, or even take something, I think photography graduates have the lowest earning potential of all graduates, and they're the least likely to attain a median salary. So I think you would have to be very pragmatic in the course that you take if you wanted to truly maximise your earning potential, and that's maybe why I wouldn't recommend just inflating the ranks of university graduates, because the more people that have a degree, it creates this expectation from employers that, well, you can select for people that only have a degree, if maybe around 1 in 3 people have one. So it gets to the point where even entry level positions now are going to favour people that have a degree, even though these individuals are still going to be underemployed and they may not even make enough money to pay off their student debt. So I think I'll leave it there. The video has went on long enough. But if you've liked this video, please give it a like, and if you can contribute anything to my Patreon, I would greatly appreciate that. And if you've liked this video, please consider subscribing. I will have more content on issues like this. So again, thank you for your time, and take care, folks.